Well, we're a little late getting started. We had a little chair problem, but I think we resolved that. I want to thank you all for coming. Welcome. My name is Gary Smith. I'm actually the treasurer of the Pine River Task Force, but our chairperson couldn't be here tonight, and the bylaws say that I have to run the meeting when the chairperson's not here. So you're stuck with me. We assume everyone got a copy of the letter that we sent out, and we got some feedback after the meeting last month that the EPA and the DEQ put on up to the middle school, that maybe folks had some other things they wanted to talk about that they didn't feel like they wanted to talk there about it. It was kind of formal and so on and so forth. And also questions were, well, what does the community advisory group think about the whole thing? So we thought, well, all right, let's set up another meeting, and we'll invite the public to come here in a much less formal environment. There are a few rules, though, to this. We have MAC TV here. They're going to videotape it so we can capture ideas or concerns that you have to help formulate our comments or feedback to the EPA and the DEQ. And Dennis here has a microphone. And he will come to you with the microphone, or you can pass it to the next guy, or as it goes. But if you don't speak into the microphone, these guys can't capture it in the video. And I'm supposed to stand here next to this thing. So we have a map on the board that shows the outline of the plant site and the adjacent properties. One thing I'd like to know, though, by a show of hands, who all lives in the adjacent neighborhood? Okay, about half. So you guys are probably the ones that will be most impacted by the whole deal. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. So having said all that, we can just open it up for any kind. Excuse me. We have another chair up here.
Oh, I think he went to go get more.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess I got let you guys decide. How would you want to start it? Do you want to start with your questions, concerns, comments, or anybody?
Can you give just an overview first, and then we can go from there? Got that question? Got it. I don't need to be on. Gary, can we just have an overview of maybe what happened at that meeting, what they explained, and then we can ask our questions from there?
Oh boy, I knew you'd ask a question like that. Well, you know, it's a very complicated site. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, and they've studied this thing for 10 years, 12 years now, and done a lot of samples, poked a lot of holes, involved a lot of people in trying to figure out how best to deal with the problem that we have. And essentially what's going on is the cap leaks and the wall leaks, and there's no bottom in it. So there's nothing to hold it in there, so it just gets out into the river, and it just gets out every which way it can, whether it evaporates and volatilizes, or the fish eats it, or however, or somebody, you know, obviously you can't go in there and dig a hole, so you're not going to get exposed to it. So the bulk of what's been going on is to try to figure out how best they're going to deal with it. And they told us in a very quick manner last month how they plan to do this. And they're going to apply various technologies, in situ treatment, which is two things. One's thermal and one's chemical oxidation. And so they're going to do that to portions of the site that they claim they're going to be able to kill the contaminants that are there to a point where they're not harmful to the ecological people, or animals rather, and human health. And they're going to excavate a very, very small portion, and then everything else is going to stay the same. They're going to put a new wall all the way around it, steel wall. They're going to put a new cap on it, and then they're going to put a pump and treat system in, which is like wells into the ground, and they're going to pull into the well to keep everything from leaving the plant site. And in layman's definition that I'm giving, that's essentially what they're going to do. But believe me, they have done a lot of studies, and we've had a lot of arguments and discussions over the years about just what they're doing. And they picked a proposal. It's Proposal 3. You can view all this stuff if you go to the EPA's website and just Google, or not Google, but search for Velsicle Superfund, and it'll take you to what they call a proposed plan for this site, and then you can back that up into the remedial investigation feasibility study, and you can read to your heart's content on what's all out there and what they're going to do. But at the end of all of this, they're telling us that when they're done, we're going to have a site that we can use for the city plans to have it for recreational use. They've done some studies and had some funding, and some of you may have participated in some of that. So they had some ideas how they want to use it. They're going to keep the river safe, and they're going to keep us safe. So I'm not sure how deep you want me to really get into that, Greg, but you know, naturally we have concerns. You know, we want to make sure that when they put a shovel in the ground and they start doing what they're doing, that they in fact do, and they fix it to the point that they say they're going to fix it to, so that we are protected, and so that the neighborhoods are protected and the river's protected, and we don't have to worry about this ever again. So having said that, you know, there's a lot of ways that, you know, maybe it costs too much money, so they decide they can't do it again, or they can't do this part and they leave something, or the model information that they put in to determine what they need to do isn't as good, so that the information they get out isn't as good. So we worry about some of those things. They tell us that nope, you know, we understand that. We've got experts. We're gonna do these things. So you know, this is where we're at with the agencies, and you know, we've gotten to know them pretty good over the years, and you know, there's some pretty smart people that have been working on this, and you have to kind of, you got to, you know, they want us to trust them, but you know, we've been here back in the 70s when we were told that back then, and of course the remedy did fail, and it appears that they've come up with a pretty good plan, but there are still a lot of questions, and they're going to design this thing as they go. They have technologies picked out that they feel that they can design to work and do what they want it to do. But as far as getting a specific answer about how they might deal with one specific item or another, we can't get that. The answer we get is that'll come out in the design phase. However, we're confident we have the technology to deal with the problem. So that's the kind of stuff that we listen to and kind of go back and forth with. There's a few people in the crowd that are in our group. We have a technical advisor here. We have, who else we got? We've got Scott Cornelius with the state. He's the project manager for the DEQ. We have Theo, CH2M Hill, who is the general contractor that hired by EPA. Thank you, sir. And well, we have Jim Heinsman. He's actually a retired DEQ member who was actually Scott's boss. We're very fortunate to have Jim on board. Have I missed somebody out there? So we've got a few people in the crowd that are regular attendees of our meetings, and I forgot Steve. We have Steve Boyd, who probably knows Mother Peg, Dad Don. He's an old St. Louis boy, but he's a soil expert. Is that fair? All right. PhD, MSU. And he's our new technical chair, and so we're real happy to have him on board. So maybe if you have questions of that nature, one of these gentlemen could, or ladies, could answer those, because I'm not the guy to ask that question. So, are there any questions, or give me some direction where you want to go with this?
I would just like to know when this process will start and how long you expect it to last.
Well, that question was asked earlier today at our technical meeting, and it's been asked every month for the last 6 years. And it's in the mail, right? But what do you think, Scott? What's a fair answer?
Hi, I'm Scott Cornelius. I'm the project manager.
Hold on, Scott. Yeah, we have to have a little patience bouncing around with this,
Sorry about that.
mic.
Is it on? Yes, it is. Okay. Okay. I'm Scott Cornelius. I'm the project manager for the state, the DEQ, on this site. It's a good question. What we have, this process actually started back in 1998, when the decision was made to remove the sediments out of the river, and you probably all have witnessed that going on. Well, that was just the beginning of this process. They did the removal there, and we go through a similar process with planning for the plant site. You have a investigation called a remedial investigation study, which you can see online or at the library. And then you move into a feasibility study, and the feasibility study tells you how you can deal with the contamination that you found and reduce the risk. Then we go into the proposed plan, which we had the meeting for, the public meeting, that told everybody what the best options were and which one was the preferred option. And that was number 3, was the preferred option. So this is a continuation of that whole process that we're going through. We solicited comments at the proposed plan meeting. The comment period is still open, and you can send those comments to Tom Alcamo at EPA. It's on the proposed plan. If you have a copy of the proposed plan, there's a area in there that tells you where to send your comments. There's one back there that Ed's holding up is a sheet that you can write your comments on and send it in. So that process is ongoing, and this meeting, I guess, is to help that. Now, that was the official proposed plan meeting. It had the court reporter, it had EPA's representative, Tom Alcamo, who couldn't be here today due to a family issue that came up, unfortunately. So you're stuck with me tonight. And I'll try to answer your questions, but this does not take the place of the proposed plan meeting, which we've already had. But we'll hopefully answer all your questions that we can. The process is ongoing. The next step would be to get everybody's comments, write a responsiveness summary. Tom and I will write that. We'll issue that with the record of decision, which is the legal document that says, we got all these comments, here's our responses to these comments, and based on those comments we've got, and the knowledge that we have from roughly 6 years of doing investigations out here, here's the preferred remedy and what's going to happen out here. Then we have to go into design, and Gary alluded to this. This proposal is like the blueprint of what's going to be done, but the devil's in the detail, and that's the design phase. And it's my, I guess, let's put it, I've got every indication that CH2M Hill will be the contractor who will actually develop the design plan, and we'll go forward with that. Now, for you people who have been here before, you've seen Tom and I and Theo and a lot of these people here all the time. We come to every meeting. This is not a process where I get to come up here and talk to you and then I get to go away and never come back. I will be here every month, as Tom will be. We'll be answering questions. We'll be providing information. As we have the design, we will walk everybody through the design who wants to come to these meetings. We will also, in probably more detail than you'll ever want to have, explain things like chemical oxidation, thermal destruction, those kind of technologies that we're planning on using or proposing to use at this site. They're very complex. I'm not an expert in those, and right now, because the design isn't done, the specifics of those plans have not been laid out. We can talk a little bit about that if anybody's interested, but I think I'll leave it at that and just say that we're now going to the ROD, the record of decision, and depending on the funding that's available, because we know that everybody has less funding these days at the agencies, state and federal government. The federal government will pay 90% of the remedy. The state pays 10%, but the federal government pays for the total design of the remedy. Okay, we have a financial restriction based on how much money that EPA can allot for this site. We don't know what that is yet. We haven't gone to that board and asked about that, although Tom's been working hard to brief all his management just like I have, and we've got our management aware of the cost of this, which happens to be $374 million to do this remedy, and we have to start talking about that. But first we have to get to that record of decision so we're sure which path we're going down. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you, Gary.
You didn't answer the question.
Yeah, you didn't ask it, you acted like.
Oh, excuse me. I thought the question. Okay.
When you start?
Oh, okay.
And how long will it take?
Oh, okay. Well, the financial part was that. It's going to take some time because we're not going to get $374 million in 1 year. And even if I got $374 million in 1 year, I couldn't conduct all that work. The work's going to have to be done in stages. First, we have to go in and destroy some of the chemicals, and we have to build a containment system. And in the design, it will lay all that out, which you'll see in the design. How long is it going to take? It'll probably take at least 10 years to complete this site. And that's just a rough guesstimate, you know, based on back of the envelope calculations and some things like that. Excuse me? Yeah. Yep. The thing that we're going to do, or we're working on right now, is we have money in an environmental trust out of the Fruit of the Loom bankruptcy. And what that will allow us to do is get money this year and work on the soils in the neighborhoods. That's our first goal, is to work on those. We're already working with the city on the drinking water system replacement, and we're working through those issues and starting to do that. Once we get the ROD signed, the city will get $6 million out of this environmental trust, and they also get some money from an insurance company, which used to be AIG, from Velsico. So they've got some money to work with to put in the drinking water system, and that's ongoing right now. We're working on that. We're going to be working on, you know, as soon as the ROD's signed, we'll be working on the neighborhoods, and those are our first priorities, and that's where we anticipate to start. We believe that the neighborhood project was, I think, projected to take 5 months to do, and the rest of the site, like I say, is dependent on funding. Could take 10 years or more to do it, depending on how the funding comes and what we can do at that time. Is that the whole question?
Well, you answered it in your typical.
I want to cover all the bases.
When are the neighborhoods going to start being cleaned up?
Well, you'll have to come back and ask me that question when we have the ROD, because until I have the ROD, I can't do anything.
Scott, when you put the orange fences up, you told me 3 or 4 months.
I understand
that.
that.
Was 3.5 years ago.
Yep, I understand that. And the reason.
I don't.
Well, let me.
You got to sit out there and eat the damn dirt for weeks at a time to do anything.
Well, let me explain that to you. And you're right. The risk is low in those fences areas, but we took it as a precautionary measure so that nobody would play around in those areas or dig in those areas. We expected that there would be an emergency removal conducted, which would have been a fast way to do it, but when EPA did their evaluation, it didn't qualify for the emergency removal people to come in and do that. So now then we had to wait for the remedial. The remedial is this process where you do the RI, do the FS, get the proposed plan and the ROD. And that's what we had to settle for. And that's why it's taken so long to get to that.
So in the meantime, You send somebody out about 3 times a year to come weed eat it.
Mm-hmm.
The trash and stuff that's inside of it, they don't pick up, they just weed eat it. It gets all chunked up in little bitty pieces. The grass is still all there. It looks like crap. It falls apart about every 3 months. Now, you did send somebody out today to tie it back together with plastic ties.
Yep.
The posts are bent over. It looks like crap.
Well, all I can say is that I'll tell my consultants to come back out, pick up the trash, remove the grass, and maintain it better. That's what I can do for
So are
you.
we going to start sometime this summer, maybe?
We're hoping that by the end of this summer we will have a action going on that will resolve those fences. Yes.
And exactly what is that action going to be?
Well, soil removal.
How deep?
Well, it depends on the area. We've gone through and sampled down, and in most cases it's above 2 feet. So I would say on an average about 2 feet of removal.
Why only certain spots?
Because the sampling, the data that we have when we sampled it showed that those were the spots that had concentrations above a human health direct contact level.
So coming out of Dankson on the west side of the street, then there's no contamination. Am I right?
Well, no,
could I
not
interrupt a
necessarily.
second? We're not getting a lot of this dialogue on recorded, so if I could get you to hold there, we're rigging up another system here so that we can actually do this. Thank you.
Okay, on the west side of the street, coming out of the chemical, there's no fences. Are you telling us that isn't contaminated on that side of the street?
I'm telling you that in those areas where there aren't fences, we don't have any data that would say that it's above a direct contact human health level.
Well, you can come down and check them anytime you want. You're going to find it in there.
Well, we have checked, and we will, and when we come back in, we will check some more.
Well, they told us 2 years ago they'd come and check it, and they haven't been back and checked it yet.
Well, I don't know who they were, but we'll be in there before we do any action. We'll come back in and check the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Can you please explain what the human health level is? Because at first you said with the fences that the risk is low, and now if they don't have fences that it's not with the human health level?
Okay, the human health level is a number that's calculated for Part 201, which is the environmental cleanup criteria for the state of Michigan. Those are the levels we use to screen when we put the fences up, because we had samples within those fences that were above that level. It'd be 57 parts per billion for DDT and 1,200 for PBB.
So what's the risk of that? You said,
Well,
it was
the risk of that is one additional cancer in every 100,000. That's the basis of the 201 numbers.
Like I said, you'd have to sit out there and eat the dirt for months for, nobody even walks on it.
Well, we've had some people in from the EPA who are, the experts in the ecological and the health. And I believe we met up to the Catholic Church at a meeting up there 3 years ago, maybe, and they spoke to that very point that you're talking about. And essentially, what they said was you'd have to sit there and do just like you said. You'd have to sit there and you'd have to eat that dirt 8 hours a day for several years to have it be a problem for you. And that was really about how he explained that. And so is that the right answer or the wrong answer? You like it or not, that's the answer we got, and that's the basis of what they're saying. So if that's so, then as far as what we're being exposed to, or you folks where the orange fences are, it hasn't been that big of a concern. And as Scott indicated, our group tried, Murray Borello, our previous technical chair, he spent a fair amount of time trying to get some emergency funding for just come on in, clean that mess up. How would you like that in your own backyard? You know, and we tried to shame everybody we could to do something, but it wasn't harmful enough. The state had to put them up. The EPA wasn't going to. So what you run into here is you have two different agencies, and they could be dealing with the same element, and they have two different numbers of what they decide is good or bad for you. When Scott talks about 201, that's a state criteria that covers an awful lot of things, but in this regard, it covers, you know, what's good for you or bad for you. And it's more stringent than the EPA's. That's why the fences are there. Even so, the experts are saying you'd have to sit there and eat it 8 hours a day for however many years to have it be an issue for you. So hopefully they're right, and they publicly stated it. So having said that, there shouldn't be anything to really worry about. But I don't think I'd go out there and try it.
But, you know, if it's not that large of a contamination, then why have I had to deal with almost 4 years of ugly orange fence in my yard?
Well, because the rod, it got put up, and once it got put up, they couldn't take it down. The only way they can take it down was an emergency removal action, which we failed in getting, or the rod signed. Once that rod gets signed, and in my opinion, they already know what they need to do to fix it. They shouldn't wait any further. The day that rod's signed, there ought to be somebody mobilized, and they ought to be cleaning it up, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know if they're going to move that fast. And you got the answer you got, and that's the kind of answers we generally get. So those are comments that you can make. There's where you came in, there's a whole table full of sheets, and by all means, there is no comment you can't make, and it'll be part of the permanent record, and they have to address everyone's comments.
Well, anyway, this gentleman here was talking about Watson Road, no contamination here. You know, I have a friend of mine that I was talking to not too long ago that talks about a drainage ditch along here somewhere, and a friend of his got a brand new pair of moon boots. Well, it melted the toe off his friend's moon boot, man, and his parents were really mad. Well, my idea for this whole thing, we have a hydroelectric dam here. Dig all this stuff out. Scott was saying $374 million to get started, right? $400 million to dig it all up. It's only $26 million more, buddy. But what you have is a reservoir here for this hydroelectric dam. If you take all this stuff here, take it out on Jackson Road, you'd have a mountain for a ski resort like Mount Brighton. Now we could turn this into a recreation, this hazardous waste site. And when it's done, it'll be done permanently. You won't have to maintain it for 50 years. Thank you very much.
One thing about the number, that the 371 million or the 400 million that gets thrown out there, that number includes a 50-year projected operation and maintenance cost. So it's a little bit of a misnomer if you think that going out there, digging the dirt, getting it done, and in 10 years you got 371 million spent. Now they very well may have that much spent, but in their estimations, it's more in the neighborhood of 86 million to do the proposal 3, and then the balance of that 371 million is spread out over the next 50 years. And
Which after 10 years, the state has to pay for it.
and that's
That's
what they're paying.
Years. You
Sorry?
just quit? What happens after 50 years? They just give up on?
No, according to, and we've asked that question too, the state tells us that they're in for a dime, they're in for a dollar. They're stuck with it.
Well, I know what the soil is like around here. It's all sand seams. And if they do that thermal oxidation, you know, and that chemical destruction, what they're going to do is they're going to be chasing that black napple around them fractures around that site forever.
Well, you know, they'll probably figure that out when they get to the design phase.
When they get going, they'll
That's
figure
the
it
answer right there.
Right.
When they get to the design phase, they're going to figure that out.
out. All right.
I mean, that's, your hypothesis is probably as good as mine.
Yeah, at the start of your presentation, you said that they're going to wall off the sides, but you mentioned nothing about the bottom because you said that that was open on the bottom. So, are they going to like put a subfloor in with steel girders or something to contain it? Because you can put a wall up, but it's still going to move towards the aquifer.
All right, so now you're getting into a little bit of the technical parts of it. So, if you see the yellow boundary line right here, they're calling that the POC, the point of containment, compliance. All right. You heard me mention the pump and treat. Okay, so essentially what that amounts to is they're going to have these wells positioned wherever, whatever location, to keep things from migrating off site. So they're going to pull back in the lower aquifer. This technique's been used a lot of places, and it's worked in a lot of places. So that takes care of the lower, where the drinking water is. So that's not going to leave the plant site in any direction. They're going to be able to pull that back. Now, if you can picture that steel wall being driven down into the clay till, or the till layer, which is about 20 foot below the water level. So if you're looking at the plant site and you see how it kind of tapers out from the fence, and then it goes down and you get through the sediment and you get into that hard till layer, they're going to drive the sheet pile 10 foot into that. And it'll stick above the water 2-3 foot, whatever. And so it'll be like a retaining wall that you'd see like on a lake or something for somebody's shoreline. So that's what you're going to see around that thing. And then they're going to put where the slurry wall is now, where the fence is. The old slurry wall is, you can't see it, but it's a failed wall. On the inside of that, down to about the same level as this till layer would be, which in some cases could be 30 foot in the ground, they're going to run tile all the way around this thing. And what's going to happen is, from what they tell me, the physics of this, it's going to be able to draw water back into the site, and then they'll pump it out of that, and it'll catch anything from leaving the site, and it'll always have a negative draw, which will pull it back from the water, back from the river, into the plant site. It'll be monitored so that they always know that it's not recharging the river, but in fact coming from the river into the plant site. All that water goes to an on-site treatment plant, which, according to their plans, is going to be over in this neighborhood somewhere, and then treated, put back in the river, clean, and it'll go on and on and on. In 50 years? Nah. 10 lifetimes? More than likely.
So are they going to leave the girders in the water like they have over the last few years from when they did the sediment removal? Is that going to be the secondary containment?
Well, we worried about that. We thought we were going to lose some river, and we thought we were going to gain some more landfill. But Theo set us straight, what, a month ago, 2 months ago? Those are coming out. They left them in initially because they weren't sure exactly what they were going to come up with for fixing up what they had to fix up out here. It may or may not have fit into a future remedy, and why pull them out and have to put them back in. So that's why they left them. And I believe that they're anticipating taking them out. They won't need them to do what they were intended for.
I have a couple of questions. I'd like to go back, first of all, to the fence sites. I have a small amount of experience in road construction, and I fail to understand how, I think it's 14 acres is what the total encompassing of these fencing is, 14 acres. How going down 2 feet is going to take 5 months. You can take a front end loader and clear it out in less than a month.
Well,
why is it going to take 5?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking they're padding it a little bit on the front and the tail end, and who knows?
We've had enough padding. Let's get right to it.
It's there's a number of blocks. According to the tables that's in the proposed plan, this whole block is shaded in red. So what that tells me, if they go out there and they do their final samplings, that entire everybody's yard, there won't be a piece of dirt that's not collected and changed. The average of 2 feet maybe that's an average, but I've seen the numbers on the deal, and I believe there was one that was down 6 feet. And I think it was over in this part. And then I've seen some only at 6 inches. If, are they going to go underneath the road, dig that road up they put through here? This road's all built up. I mean, that's, they're going to go out and they're going to do some more final samples. They're going to figure it out, and they're going to put it in the design phase, and then they're going to come out here and start. So they'll remove all the dirt that they need to. They'll put dirt back where they need to, and they'll try to restore it to as it was or better condition, reseed it, replant it, whatever they have to do.
Okay, I had one final, and then I'll let somebody else go here. On your containment wall, you have a slurry wall that goes all the way around it, and they were told back in 1980, whatever, it wasn't going to work. They didn't listen. They did it anyway. All right? Now you're telling me you're going to put those pilings on the inside of the wall and drive them down.
No, the toe, if you're outside the fence on the riverside,
okay, on the river,
you'll see it kind of slopes down to the river.
Okay.
All right, that's called the toe. That's what they tell me it's called. And if you follow that all the way down, whatever the taper is, it'll end up hitting into the sediments, and then you go through that sediment into the till, and they say they're going to drive these things in there 10 foot into the till. And that'll be all the way around. That'll be the whole perimeter. So that distance between where the new sheet pile is going to be, which is a new improved kind of steel wall, it's a better deal than what you see out there right now. The distance between that and the fence that you see there now, that could be 40, 50 feet.
And with relating to that fence, where's the slurry wall?
Just on the inside of the fence.
Inside of the fence. So this is going to be on the outside of the
Correct.
fence, then, all the way around the river and on down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
I just had a question for Scott. Is there a chance for the next meeting we can get the data for all the houses you've done in the neighborhood? And he's probably got it out there so we can give these people the information so they can look it up. That's question number one. And then as you're responding, question number two is, would you let them know if they just went and started digging it up, how many people like their health? Raise your hand. Would you let them know what would happen if we just started digging that nasty stuff up? Letting it go.
Okay, well, that's a two-part question, I guess. I was told I have to come up here and stand beyond the cameras. Let's see. First part of that question is fences. Not the fences.
It was the data for.
Oh, the data.
homes.
Okay. All of the data is available in the RI. The RI has all the maps, all the data, and it's online at EPA's website, and it's also at the library, and I believe it's on. Did you guys put it on your website too?
I want to say
well, I'm
yes,
not going to say that.
but
then.
our website's been kind of up and down.
Well, for sure it's in the library and it's on EPA's website. So you can go there and you can see where your house is and you can see the data points that were collected so far on a grid over that neighborhood. Okay, that's number one. Now, before we get talking about doing anything, before anybody's bringing out a bulldozer or anything else, we are going to go out and sample. We are going to collect the data that we need on a tighter grid than we have right now. We're going to come to each one of you who owns a house, and we're going to show you that data. We're going to sit down with you, and we're going to say, this area needs to be excavated. And we'll have more public meetings to talk about bigger general things. We aren't going to show up and do any work until we're sure that everybody who owns a house is fully informed, and we're going to get your consent to do the action. And it's all going to be very planned and very laid out. There's not going to be anybody taking an action without following health and safety rules and preventing airborne material from coming up in the air and being a mess. We're not going to have any of that in there. It's all going to be very controlled, And hopefully for this, we'll be able to do it in a way that it won't inconvenience people who live in the houses. We will, there's a possibility that some plantings will have to be replaced. Grass will have to be replaced, things like that. And that will be all part of the plan, and you will get to see that plan before any action happens. So I want to assure you that we're not just running out there. You will know all about it and have given the okay to come on your property before it happens. Okay? Well.
Second part.
Okay, second part.
If we were just to go take a bulldozer and just start scooping up that plant,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
how much help? Second part is as they talked about this dam and the hydro and whatever, and believe me, was truly one of the first ones to say, just get it out of there. But after you realize all the nasties that are in there, you can't just let them go airborne. Could you please address that?
Okay. What he's talking about is in this part of the site right here and over here, we have something called non-aqueous phase liquids, which are called NAPLs or DNAPLs, dense non-aqueous phase liquids. We also have a chemical that's known as 1,2-dibromo-3-chloropropane. That is a volatile chemical, which means it's like gasoline. It evaporates into the air quickly. It's in here, it's highly toxic, and it's a male sterilant. Not to scare you when I say those things, we know it's in there. And that's the reason we're not going to dig it up, because we're not going to expose workers to it, and we're not going to expose the community to it. We are using a technology that will actually use heat to destroy the chemicals in this part of the site and this part of the site. Okay, let me continue. There's two areas down here that we know about where the chemicals are destroyed by using other chemicals like hydrogen peroxide to break them down, and we will be doing that down here. And there's two other areas that have chemicals that are not volatile, do not come off in gases, that we can actually dig out and remove. Those areas we call source areas. We are destroying, removing the sources of the chemicals that would contaminate groundwater, that would go back into the river. Those are the sources that we're going to destroy. When we get done, there won't be chemicals in the site that exceed the saturation constant, which means that they won't be free product. They won't be like this DNAPL. They won't be able to flow. They'll be attached to the soil, and they won't be mobile. And that's our goal, is to stop things from being mobile, because if you can have chemicals in the soil, but if it's not mobile, it's not going anywhere. Once we destroy those chemicals, we will have this containment system. And one of the things that Gary didn't say is that inside this wall is an extraction system that keeps the water down, so you have like a funnel. The groundwater's up here, the surface water, and on the top of that funnel, because the funnel's empty, all the water wants to go in the funnel. It doesn't want to go out of the funnel. It can't go out of the funnel. And this system will cause that to happen. It will make lowering this water, groundwater in here, causes a force, a hydraulic force, that will push water into it. Okay, we also have right now a DNAPL or a NAPL collection system that's over here. And we may have to extend that down here, given what we find during our pre-design sampling. That's collecting this NAPL. It's collecting it, we're removing it, we're destroying that by sending that off-site for incineration right now. We also have the wells underneath here that, and I don't have, this isn't really our proposed plan meeting, so I don't have my fancy graphics and pictures for you, but we have modeled the extraction system, and the extraction system contains all the water in this area so that even if the chemicals were to get outside this, they would be collected and routed back to a wastewater treatment system that will be on site. And Gary said it was up here. We had to put it somewhere, but when they do the design, they'll figure out where the best location is, and we'll work with the city to make sure that we put it in a place that doesn't interfere with redevelopment of this site and things like that. Those are always considerations of ours when we work on sites like this. So we've got, like, if you could think of it as several buckets under this site to collect the water. Well, first of all, we destroy the source, then we collect the water that continues to come from there. Now, I'll give you an example. Over in Cadillac, there's a groundwater contamination from Rex Air, Kaiser Northern Air, and Northern Air, which were two different automotive parts manufacturers. And we put in a pump and treat system over there that was supposed to run for 64 years. We put it in 1992, and by 1996 it was done and it did its work. Okay? The calculations were that it would take longer to move the groundwater to get to the safe level of groundwater. But because they used bigger pumps and they used more wells, they actually accelerated that process. They had, carbon filtration units that wouldn't fit in this room. They had air strippers, tall air strippers on that system. They used the technologies that were best for those chemicals. And that's what we've done here. We've looked at the technologies and we've matched the technologies up with the chemicals that we're going to deal with. We know a lot about these chemicals. These chemicals have been treated at other places, at other sites, and we have a list of those sites which we have presented at different presentations, that the chemical oxidation, the thermal destruction, all that works on those. But before we implement any of those remedies, we're going to collect that material and go to the lab, and we're going to run these oxidation and thermal treatment on that sample. We're going to find out how that works. Once we're sure that that works in the lab, then we're going to come out here and we're going to do it on a very small scale. We call it pilot scale. And after that works, then we're going to go into full production and do it on the site as planned. Now, a lot of people say, well, how are you going to know if it actually does the job? Well, the same way we know that what chemicals are in here right now. We take soil borings, and from those soil borings, we collect samples, and we can tell what the chemicals left over are and what the concentration of those chemicals are. I don't want really this to be my kind of, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I don't really want this to be my meeting. I'm not really the scheduled speaker here, so I'm going to turn this back over.
Oh, not at all. You answered
The one
that question well,
question
Scott. Thank
in
you.
regard to the thermal treatment of the soil, how are you going to treat the soil? I mean, are you going to have to excavate it to then thermal treat it?
No. The thermal treatment is done in situ. That's a good point. Both the chemical oxidation and the thermal treatment are done in situ, which means they're done right in the ground, right where the chemicals are.
Are you going to put in like thermal bores or something?
Yeah, we
to heat it?
drill holes and insert these rods into it.
And how much volatility do you expect from these chemicals from around those bores? Because there's going to be some gaps. And
one of the things we do, we have three things that happen in a thermal treatment. We seal the top so that nothing can volatilize off. We have a soil vapor extraction system, so when it does vaporize, we're collecting it all. And we have wells in there that collect any liquids that may be there also. So those are the ways and that's a very good question, because I didn't get into that much detail. I'm not an expert on this, and Jason, who works for CH2M Hill, has been here, and he is the expert, and he will be back here talking about all this as this develops.
I know I've asked these questions before at task force meetings, and I've talked to Scott before. With the orange fencing in our yards, when the orange fencing first went up in my yard, I had asked if that was it, and I was told yes. It's right contained right within those fences. It's not going anywhere. And I wasn't real sure about that, and neither was my neighbor Penny, and we had asked you to come out and retest. And you said that you would come out and retest anywhere we wanted you to retest. And when you came out, we showed you different spots to test. One of them was in my basement, in my sump. And some of the places that we had you retest were just maybe a few inches or a few feet from where the fences already were. And they tested positive. And we ended up with more orange fencing. At that time, well, before that, you told us that you'd done a grid.
Yep.
So that's all there was the
Well-
original orange fencing.
No, that we never said that's all there was. We said based on our sampling, we have fenced the areas that we knew about. And what we do when we take a sample, we take these samples on a grid, if you can imagine, just a square grid. And we take the four corners of the grid and we take a soil sample. Now, if that soil sample comes up positive and has a level above the criteria that we talked about, then we step out 5 feet and we take some more samples, 4 other samples. And we keep doing that until we find no more contamination above the criteria, and that's what we did. What Penny had in her yard was she wasn't on the grid. She was off the grid. You and Penny asked us to come back out. We came back out. We did some more testing. And that's why we're going to do, before we do any more work, we're going to come out and do the design sampling to make sure that we have all the areas before we actually take any action.
Okay, I have lots of questions here. When you tested my sump pump, first you had told me there would be no contamination in there. I had let you know that my basement leaks, and I was worried about contamination in the basement. The one wall that leaks, the water has to travel across my basement floor to the sump pump. It's all the way on the other side. And you said it would be impossible for the DDT or the contaminants to be in there. When it was tested, it was just skimmed off the top of the sump. The soil wasn't tested in the sump, and there is a lot of soil in there, by the way, that can be tested, and I've asked to have tested, and hasn't been. But anyways, it tested positive, not above Part 201 criteria.
Right.
Well, it was just skimmed off the top of the water. Doesn't DDT have to adhere to something, to soil? Wouldn't it have sunk down into the soil in the sump, and shouldn't that have been tested? And one more thing. At the meeting at the high school, you had said when the neighborhoods are cleaned up and the yards are cleaned up, that we would receive paperwork that our yards are clean. So how can I sell my home knowing that there's DDT in my sump? It's below Part 201 criteria, but I still have to disclose that before I can sell my home. I can't sell it.
Well, I'm not a realty expert on that, but you're right. You're right. You do have to disclose that. That is one of the consequences.
So I would not get a paper?
And anybody does. You have to disclose that you're down the street from a Superfund site too.
That was not disclosed to me.
Well, I don't know if it was disclosed to you, but as I understand the law for selling property, if you're within, a certain distance from a Superfund site, that should be disclosed too.
But that's getting off track.
Okay, let's go back. As I remember it, we did sample what we could find in the bottom of that sump.
You did not. I watched.
Well, I would
stood
go.
right there.
I would have to go back and look at that. The one problem we had was we would have tried to find material that was that the DDT would adhere to, and in the basement that I looked at, there wasn't anything on like the walls or the floor that we could really test, and so the instructions were to the consultant who came out and did the sampling that they take something from the sump. And I believe that, at least what I remember, my recollection is that they took stuff from the bottom of that sump, the sediments, and I will go back and look that up because, Terry, my memory is different than yours, and I can easily look that up, and I will look that up.
Well, you can look that up.
I
I
will.
was standing right there and you weren't.
You know,
And I questioned him at the time, and I've questioned you about it before, and you said, I asked you if you would come back out and retest the bottom of the sump, and you said no. There would be no more testing done. You were done testing. And that was stated publicly in a task force meeting.
well, and we are. We're done testing.
Well,
That's-
Terry, what would it
we
take
are.
to resolve this issue?
I would like the soil in the bottom of my sump tested.
Is that something that,
Not the top, skimming it off the top of the water.
Well, I guess after the meeting, we'll talk about that. I'm not going to commit to do it or not do it. I feel kind of like I was invited to a meeting or wasn't really even invited to this meeting, and now I'm trapped on this issue. So I will talk to you privately and we'll discuss it, but right now I'm not committing to sampling anything more. We've done the RI, we have the information we need to move forward. If you want to ask questions about the proposed plan, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I'm just not going to, I guess, make a deal in this forum about anything.
All right.
just a second, Walt, just a second, Walt, get the
All right.
microphone.
You've done all your testing, and how many years ago was that? Now, when you find out that, the contaminants have found a way into her basement, now they've found a path. Now, in two more, if that was 2 years ago, it doesn't get any better. Yeah.
The contamination that was found in the samples was below actionable levels. Well, now what that means is it's below a health level, and we're not going to take an action on it.
It was below a health level then, but what is it now?
It's not getting any worse, probably.
Oh, the chemical site didn't get any worse, did it?
They're not getting any worse because they're safe.
But the leaks get better. Once it finds a path, it just continues.
No, not really. DDT has a hard time moving through groundwater.
How many
It's one
gallons
of
of
those
nap?
chemicals that you wouldn't expect even to be in groundwater.
How many gallons of Napple have you pumped out of them manholes?
We're not talking Napple. There is no Napple in her basement. There is no Napple in her sump, and we're not talking Napple. That's a
What-
whole
what are we
different.
talking?
Don't even go there. That's a whole different issue.
What are we talking?
You're talking DDT, and DDT is available from a lot of different things. There was a lot of use of DDT. We would expect to find low levels of DDT anywhere you look.
Are you going to tell us somebody sprayed it on her flowers, huh?
I don't know. Possibly.
All right, hey,
Very widely used chemical years ago.
Yeah.
excuse me.
Spray everything for mosquitoes.
What we want to try to avoid is getting into one of those kind of rhubarbs that you can get into pretty easy in one of these deals. We want to try to remain positive. It's real easy to get into an argument and real easy to disagree. We've all, we've been doing this for a while, and but we want to try to keep it productive. So if we can do that in a civil manner, let's do that.
I guess the one question I have is, they're doing no more preliminary sampling. That's clear. But
pre-design.
when they go for the pre-design, but when they go to do the neighborhood cleanup, could they include, or would that be part of the negotiation for like her sump if she wants the soil tested?
Most assuredly, they'll be back
I mean,
and
that's
looking at
when they
everything.
could do it because they're going to be doing analysis of the rest of the property.
Well, I may be speaking out of turn here, but I believe that's the plan. They've already stated that when they come in to do this, they're gonna expand their whole search, and they're anticipating finding more.
But then she could also make that request at that time.
I think that would be appropriate.
You make it today, write it on the comments.
I think that would be more than appropriate.
Maybe you could explain to the people, I've had the question asked to me several times, the relationship between human contact and a lifetime of human contact and a lifetime of living with all the different chemicals that we're exposed to, like DDT and the contaminated river water or the contaminated city water and all those other things in combination. I don't know who's going to answer, whether it's Scott or...
Well, what exactly do you want out of that?
They want to know, when you say so many parts per million is safe for human contact, but when you have several contaminations that you're exposed to,
right,
what's the relationship between all of them? Is it worse, better, equal, or what?
Well, what do you fall into a chronic and an acute kind of thing there with, but I think we've had this discussion a number of times. We've had to help people into town. We've tried to get a health study. We've worked with the CDC. They've been here and told us no. The ATSDR, they've been here and told us no. I know that's one of his big deals, and he's had how many grants you've tried to get and different experts. I mean, it's been a real struggle to try to get a health study. But one of the answers we get, what Phil's talking about is okay, what our exposures here are, and then over a lifetime of it, how is that going to really work on us, our body burden, and how much of it do we absorb, do we retain and carry around with us every day? Well, how many times have you sprayed aerosol around you, or insect repellent, or ate a bad burger or whatever? But we're exposed to so many things, and we all have PBB in us. I mean, we all have radioactivity in us. Anybody that's been around since the atomic test they did. I mean, this is the kind of answers we get. We know what this chemical will do to you, but when you put them in a cocktail and marry them up, they do not want to go there. The health experts do not want to talk about that. Why? I don't know, mass hysteria. Everybody's going to raise their hand and say, well, that's why I got cancer, or that's why I got emphysema, or that's why I got diabetes, or all the ailments that we have. And, we read it every day and we hear it on the news that what's the next thing that causes. I heard today that that they're giving people, kids, an aerosol to breathe into to keep them from being asthmatic after they've been exposed to something that's supposed to cure them in some other way. I mean, it was like, okay, where does this end? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I'm not sure anybody in the room can.
As far as I'm concerned,
we have a volunteer. We'll let her. So
there isn't an answer, like Gary said. Right now, there's so many chemicals that are on the market that to just do the testing, then just a small portion really have any health assessments even done on those individual chemicals. So it's just a vast unknown. It's very difficult to get a cause relationship from, one individual to another individual. And it's, we look at animals because for some reason we don't like to test people. And we are also exposed to other things. So it's, if you're a smoker, then that gives you other exposures that you may have. So it's just a very complicated thing to have risk assessment. Not that you shouldn't demand it, but we also have no idea when we put those chemicals together what they do. So that combine, we've got information on individual chemicals and we do risk assessments based on an adult male. We don't do our risk assessment. We don't set up these numbers for safety based on a fetus. It's based on adult male. So that's another problem we have with risk assessments. Now, they build into those numbers, they base it on adult male, they build in safety factors for that, you know, to try and compensate for those unknowns. But when you mix multiple chemicals and over different exposures, it is basically a big unknown. It's just as a territory that we just don't have enough information or enough toxicologists to go there.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you. I have a question for Scott, and I'll be nice. When the yards are going to be cleaned up, how is the contamination going to be removed? What type of trucking? Will they be the big tandem trucks? Will they be opened? How will the contaminants be removed from the neighborhoods?
Well, at this point, I can't really answer that question. They will, you know, obviously there will be an excavator of some form involved and trucks involved in it. The trucks will most likely, will be covered. The material will be removed in probably a moist state so that it doesn't get dusty and stuff like that. We're going to take the precautions to make sure that there is no dust generation, and that when the trucks leave that they don't generate a dust or a residual. So that's about what I can tell you about it. We'll follow standard health and safety practices that we would follow to protect people, to protect our workers, and you have to remember that we have workers who have a larger exposure than anybody in the neighborhood because they're right in it, working with it, and our health and safety plans will protect them from exposure, and that will also be set out to protect the community from exposure. So that's all I can tell you right now until we get the actual plan out.
Okay, thanks.
Terry, that's one of it falls under a category that we're commenting about, officially commenting as a CAG, about the community quality of life. And it has to do with those types of issues, you know, the monitoring. How are you going to guarantee, ensure, once you start moving stuff around, that there isn't something, you know, moving off-site into neighborhoods, or in your case, when they're doing your yards, air monitoring systems, notification, communication, getting that message out, letting you know ahead of time what we're doing today. If it's windy or too windy to work, we're not going to do that. We're going to, you know, I say we, you know, the agency people. And there's just a multitude of things on our list that we're going to officially comment on, and this falls into when they start driving those sheet piles in. Remember how noisy it was? Holy cow. And but we're hoping to convince them that there's other technology out there that'll do it more quietly. We've seen some of that on YouTube, and I forget what sheet pile driver on YouTube, and you'll have all the silent. There's one that's silent, you know. So who knows if that's practical here, but that would definitely be the way we would like to see it. And it, you know, the whole, you know, the exposures that Scott was talking about, the DBCP is the biggie, because it's a male sterilant and you're not going to see it. And so that's why they don't want to uncover anything. They want to kill it in the ground. But if something gets out, there's going to be a system set up to monitor these things so that we're aware, and to the point where we're looking at maybe possibly having cameras mounted that's 24/7. You can go to a website or perhaps the public access people. I'm not sure how we're going to work it all out yet, but it's in the works. The funds have been approved, and we're working with the city jointly on that. So you can actually watch them working out there. You know, I mean, for those of you who don't have anything else to do, you dial in. But you know, and just saying, and you know, and so the things like that, because we know the noise is gonna be an issue, we know the dust is gonna be an issue, we know that there's a potential for exposure, don't want that no how. You know, and so, just so you know, that's an issue that we've been talking about for a while, and we definitely have comments developed that we're gonna, short of demanding, you know, we're demanding.
Are you gonna put up like wind socks so people can?
It's in the design phase. Yes, there'll be directional indicators, there'll be things just like that, because those are all inexpensive, very doable. Anybody can pick up on kind of stuff. Or if you know, internet, you'll be able to go online, you'll be able to get up in the morning with your coffee and say, well, I wonder what's going on over there today. You know, which way is the wind blowing?
Outside, if you're outside, you know, something happens, you at least know which way the wind's blowing.
And, you know, and so we're still working on that whole notification thing. I mean, to the point where we want real-time data. I mean, the minute they get it, we want. I mean, we're developing some language that hopefully they have to respond to, and they can't wait a lot.
I got a question for Scott. And how many thousand yards were supposed to be removed out of these residential neighborhoods with the orange fences? And are these people going to be allowed to live in their homes while you're doing the excavation?
Well, we have to do the final sampling to know how much cubic yards we're going to remove. And it's our intentions right now that we're going to try and inconvenience people as little as possible and have them live in their homes while we work around them. So that's our goal right now. When we get down to the planning, we'll have more details for the people who live in those houses that need to have excavation done around them, and we'll work through it with them.
It's determined to be hazardous to health. Are you going to supply, you know, lodging for them or something while you get this done?
I can't comment on that because we don't have the plan yet, and it's, you know, we're removing the material, at least some of it, because it's above a direct contact.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not directly in contact with it, it's not a problem. You have to look at the risk pathway.
Mm-hmm.
So other parts, there's an ecological number to protect basically robins from eating contaminated worms.
Right.
And that's a lower, you know, that will cover some other areas of the property, and that's not harmful to humans because it's at a lower concentration. It only affects the worms and the robins.
Well, what's the estimate on the amount of yards you plan on removing?
You know,
you got a rough estimate. I seen it in one of your RIs.
well, it's in the feasibility study, and it's
Right.
probably even in the proposed plan. What do you got there for me, Theo? Do you have that number? Okay. Okay. I can't tell you that right now, but I'll get back to you on that.
I think it was somewhere around 40,000 yards.
That sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Like that was probably, yeah, 40,000 from the plant site, though.
No, that was the fenced-in residential area.
Well, there's no way that there's 12 acres within those fences or 40,000 cubic yards within the orange fences. I can guarantee you that.
It was an astronomical amount.
What?
It was an astronomical amount that I read.
No, those are the numbers for parts on the site itself. I remember the 12 acres and the 40,000. That's a different number. I'm not even sure. I don't know how much right offhand is being, but we can get that number for you because I'm sure we've got it in the feasibility study.
All right.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm a little bit of an outsider, but I came over here because I've got some property over in the neighborhood close to the plant, and it's probably not very saleable because of it. But seems like it sometimes gets a little bit negative. And the one thing that I want to keep in mind, it was never really sweet to live next to a chemical plant. If you remember, if you had an automobile and the hood and the top of it would rust because I lived in Elma, but we could tell people from St. Louis by the chemical plant because of their cars. Now I moved over here. St. Louis is a wonderful town, and I'm a bit of a scavenger. I think that's a Gratiot County thing, and I can remember when they first did the containment and I walked along the stones along the north side of the river, and I could see when they toppled that smokestack that was all these glazed brick, how nice those were, and they were kind of rounded. So I worked in the mud and dug these brick out and took them by a little flat boat over to Penny Park where I could load them in my pickup truck and get them home. And so they're all around the house, and I knew that it was goo, and I knew that it was surely bad for me because it really stunk and so forth, and I'm still here, as well as a lot of folks growing up here. We're soon going to have some recreational property around this neighborhood. I know that the neighbors have been hurt. I know that it's hurt the saleability of their property. I would certainly like to think, in all the attempts to dig up soil and so forth, it's certainly time for some new infrastructure in that neighborhood down there. And I know they're going to replace sidewalk where they have to take it out. But it would seem like, to help compensate for some of the troubles that the residents have seen, that would be a good opportunity to go through there and at least upgrade things to maybe a decent caliber. So that's just my injection, but it's going to be positive. It's probably 10, maybe more realistically 15 years or 20 years away, but it was no piece of cake living next to the chemical plant to begin with. And so there is some positive out here, and I know that people here have suffered more than I've suffered. I just moved and boarded up the house, but I'll be back. But you got to clean the neighborhood up first.
I know you can drive down by the plant on this side and you can see the fences and all that stuff, but I live just north of the river there, and the plant real close to the river, and I never hear nothing about that side of town, you know. But like that guy was just talking, we had them chemical dust over in our ground and cars and everything every morning in the 70s, so. And all the wind blows that way when they're tearing stuff down and everything, you know, so you kind of wonder what your soil over there is like too.
Well, you know, and they've told us in their samplings on the other side of the river that they're not getting hits of anything. And some VOC, volatile organic compounds, but they're, you know, that would be like a gasoline or a vapor off something, are just minimal. When they were cleaning the river, a lot of lime went over that way. A lot of guys' gardens looked probably as best, you know, as they've ever looked, but you know, it was probably a mess too. I believe they washed a lot of cars that year, but they're telling us that no, that's not the case. The area that is contaminated on the other side of the river is the old golf course site, or the old burn pit, or the old Velsical. What's it called now?
It's called the Velsical Burn Pit.
It now has a new name, the Velsical Burn Pit. Its acronym will be VBP, and till further notice. But that, I don't know that shows up on this map, but it would be at the end of Prospect here, and then there's these two houses right here, and a fence, you go between number 3T and number 4, or number 3 green and number 4 tee box, and then there's a little wedge-shaped triangular, I don't know, 2 acres, maybe 3.1 acres or something, and that's where the old burn pit was. And they literally used to take their stuff over there, and they being Michigan Chemical, maybe Velsical, I'm not sure what the dates were with that. They just dumped the crap, burn it. They had a well over there. And I remember going there as a kid playing in it. I'm still here too, but a little less hair than I used to have. But that site's destined to be, or actually slated to be clean. There's some stuff out on that right now. There's a health study. I believe Scott's got a bunch of stuff he wants to hand out for anyone. Nice segue, huh? But for those who are interested in what really is going on over there, there's some data out on the health study they've done. The project manager is developing a work plan now. We're told that it's going to be less than $25 million to clean it, which is a good thing. Not that it's 25 million, but that's the cutoff. Anything over 25 million has to go before a remedy review board. It has to get on a schedule. It has to, and we're all going to be dead and gone by the time it gets to the top of the list. This way, it gets in there quicker. They're going to, they really feel they're going to be able to clean that up in conjunction with the progress out here on the plant site. So we're going to get two things cleaned up in all of that. So, but outside of that area right there, they're saying that the soils over there are good.
I brought this up before, but if nothing has hurt property values as much as those orange fences you got around here. If you don't get them done this year, why don't you put green fences there? Why don't you put them up straight? If you were putting fences for me, I'd have fired you long ago. Those fences are terrible. And just do it right or don't do it at all. And I personally can't figure out why they ever were put up there. Before you worry yourselves into an early grave, look at your kids around here. Most every kid I know is bigger than his dad. And St. Louis is just downwind of this. They had a cross-country track team that won the state. You got to run a long ways to win a track. These kids are in good shape. You go to any gymnasium, look at the records up there, and they're all current. There aren't any records that were put up there 30 years ago. These kids are running faster, they're jumping higher, and I think we're going to have a good place here to live. Thank you.
We've answered all the questions. I can't believe that.
Sounds like a good positive note to end on.
That's a good positive note. So
One other thing.
let me make just a short announcement. Clay has reminded me that if you go to on YouTube, the proposed plan EPA meeting is on YouTube at PRSCTF official. And what that is it was a video of last month's meeting up to the middle school. And even after that meeting, Tom Alcamo, made the comment to me. He says, and he felt bad. He said that, God, I went through that awful fast. Well, there's a lot of material to cover. I just touched the surface of all the material that he could have talked about. And he was sincerely felt bad that he couldn't, take more time with it, explain it better, because it was coming at you pretty fast. And if you haven't been involved in it, you're just getting all this new information. And, I know how that goes. And so maybe if you go to the YouTube site, you may have an opportunity to, at your leisure, replay, or however it is you have to do it. But it's just another place to go look and find out more about what really is going on the site. And let me ask some more questions. But before I forget and we leave, I just want to say that we've been at this since whatever 98 or 7 or whatever it was. We've had different project managers from the DEQ. We've had quite a few different project managers from the EPA. They like to move them around, and they like to move their people around from time to time, and I don't know if it's because they get too close to us and they start feeling, more about the site than they're supposed to be thinking about, whatever it is, and or there's better opportunities, they get advancements, and a lot of things happen, but we've had our difficulties, we've had our differences of opinion, we've fought with them and argued with them, and I've butted heads way more than I probably should have, but I just want to say that, we've got a pretty good group of people we've worked with, and they're consultants and everybody, and they have put a lot of effort into figuring out what's out there, samples, and studying it, and listening to us bellyache and complain and give advice when they don't want it, and they take it anyway. And so, I'm not trying to sugarcoat this, because, that's all said at an arm reach deal. Because, we're all going to try to watch this as it goes, just as you folks should. And, and they're guaranteeing they're gonna give us what they're gonna give us, and we're expecting that. And I think that's what we're gonna get. So, anyway, you owe me $1.
Okay. One last announcement. The Michigan Department of Community Health does a public health assessment on every Superfund site as it becomes a Superfund site. And the Valsico burn pit, which Gary was talking about across the river, was made its own Superfund site. And here's a couple documents that they have released, and they've given me some to be the messenger to bring them here so that you can have them. Now, I'm not sure they gave me enough. I think they gave me 35, and from the looks of it, there's more than 35 people here. And we already gave some away at the technical meeting today. So, if I'll hand them out after the meeting, and if you want one and you don't have one, I'll have a piece of paper. You can put your name and address, and I'll have Community Health send you one directly. I think that's the best I can do.
All right, thanks. And like one other thing, you know, going forward with this, they're telling us that there's been a study going on downriver to where the Pine meets the Chippewa, and you know, they found things downriver. You know, they're seeing stuff right where it jumps right into the Chippewa, but you know, as far as they're concerned, they're just looking at the Pine. And I think they've been kind of looking at this thing since '02, is it?
Yeah.
And they're at the point now where they put together some information, and it's going to the EPA. And what they do is they name these operable units. 1, operable unit 2. 1 is the plant site. 2 was the river cleanup. Is the burn pit going to be 4?
No, the burn pit is its own Superfund.
All right, so it's going to be its own deal, so that'll be OU1 under its heading. OU3 is going to be downstream of the dam. So they have every expectation, and this is the plan, and they're going to go down and they're going to start figuring out what's all not good down there and start cleaning that up. And it doesn't look too bad, but there's still some stuff going on. There's some old ancient things in the sediment that need to be cleaned up, and that'll return that to a better quality of a river. And you know, outside of protecting us, what they're really doing is protecting the river. So everything they're doing on this plant site is to protect the river, you know, aside from us. And that's a good thing, and I'm sure hoping to live long enough to see all this come together. So if there are no other questions, thanks.